And we have a second outstanding nominee to confirm today as well, Pete Buttigieg, for Secretary of Transportation. Mr. Buttigieg, known to many simply as Mayor Pete, has demonstrated an impressive familiarity with our nation's entire transportation challenges. Challenges which are pronounced in states like my own, where projects like the Gateway Tunnel are a top national priority. I know that Mr. Buttigieg is committed to working with members from both sides to improve rail and transit, highways, and more in rural communities, urban centers, and everywhere in between. I'm excited to call him Secretary Pete by the end of the day and get to work with him immediately on helping the MTA, the nation's largest transit network in the country, and moving Gateway forward after years of cynical obstruction by the Trump administration.
Closed. Under the previous order, the Senate will proceed to executive session to consider the following nomination, which the clerk will report.
Nomination, Department of Transportation, Peter Paul Montgomery Buttigieg of Indiana to be Secretary.
Assistant Democratic Leader.
Mr. President, I rise this morning, of course, to support the nominations of Pete Buttigieg to be Secretary of Transportation and Alejandro Mayorkas to head the Department of Homeland Security. They're both exceptional choices by the administration to fill critical positions.
Mr. President, I rise today in support of Pete Buttigieg and his nomination to lead the Department of Transportation. Whether it's rebuilding our crumbling roads and bridges, maintaining our leadership in the global mobility race, or improving pipeline safety, there's no shortage of challenges facing our incoming secretary. As a fellow Midwesterner and as a former officer in the U.S. Navy Reserve, I can't think of anyone more equipped to take on this challenge than Pete Buttigieg. He understands the need to revitalize our infrastructure because he's seen it in our neighborhoods and on our roads each and every day when he served as a mayor. He has a unique understanding of how the department can be a resource to state and to local governments, and what can be done to ensure that the federal government supports those states and local governments and make sure that need gets addressed most effectively. If we're going to build back better, a partnership at each level of government will be absolutely vital. Having someone at the helm who recognizes that that relationship is so important will be an incredible asset to the department. I've also had several conversations with Secretary-designate Buttigieg on the auto industry, which is the very beating heart of our manufacturing economy. And as the industry advances both towards electrification and self-driving technologies, it will be critical that we support these technologies to make sure that they are safely deployed and that they are deployed here in the United States. We have an opportunity to save lives, but also to create jobs and empower our domestic auto industry to take the moonshot for artificial intelligence and spur technological innovation. And I'm pleased that Secretary-designate Buttigieg has committed to working with us as we craft legislation that establishes a federal framework around these new technologies. And finally, I'm excited to work with Secretary-designate Buttigieg on improving pipeline safety, especially around the Great Lakes. We know that Line 5 under the Straits of Mackinac pose a very serious threat to the Great Lakes. And the Great Lakes are not only an economic driver and natural resource for our country, they're literally in the DNA of every Michigander. As a Midwesterner and as a husband to a Michigan native who was born and raised in Traverse City, Secretary-designate Buttigieg fully recognizes the need to protect the Great Lakes. I agree with Mayor Pete's belief that he says, quote, good transportation policy can play no less a role than making possible the American dream. I am proud to support Pete Buttigieg's historic nomination, which has already garnered bipartisan support, and I urge all of my colleagues to vote for him. Thank you, Mr. President.
Objection?
Mr. President, I come to the floor today to support the nomination of Pete Buttigieg to be Secretary of Transportation. We all know the nominee as Mayor Pete, a man who basically came onto the national stage as a Midwest mayor who had lots of enthusiasm for making investments in America's future. So today we're considering his nomination to be Secretary of Transportation at a time when we need a lot of work done on transportation. And in my opinion, he's a young, energetic mayor who is going to help us usher in a new era of transportation. That means there's going to be a lot of bipartisan dialogue about how we get there, but this job should not be underestimated in the importance that the transportation sector and the investments for the future need. That is that our transportation system serves as a backbone of our economy, and when it's not doing well, the consequential impacts of that affect our economy. It affects how our businesses compete in a global economy. It affects how people get to and from work, and it affects their home life as well. So it's a big job that we have, and I know that this mayor and future Secretary of Transportation understands how big this challenge is. We've underinvested in our infrastructure for decades. In the past 10 years alone, we've underfunded our infrastructure needs by $1.5 trillion. The American Society of Engineers estimates that we need to invest $5.6 trillion in our infrastructure over the next 2 decades, or the United States stand to lose about $10.3 trillion in GDP. I know this because my state knows this. I think the presiding officer knows this as well. If the transportation infrastructure doesn't work, goods and services don't get through your ports, they don't get to their destination, and businesses choose other vehicles or other avenues for the products to be delivered. America needs to be competitive, and the American public also knows that poor infrastructure and the problems that they see in their communities have to be addressed, whether that's concrete crumbling off of bridges, delayed trains, buses, congestions, railroads, or any of the many issues. Just this week, a highway in California slid into the ocean, disrupting traffic along the famous Highway 1, and this could be a delay for months. I know, again, the presiding officer understands this, as well as the state of Washington. Mother Nature doesn't always comply with our transportation needs. So while these investments in numbers may seem huge to people, it is what this investment will enable that we need to keep focused on. We need to focus on the fact that the United States makes and grows things, and we need to get them to their destinations. We need people to be able to get to their place of employment. So we need someone at the Department of Transportation who is enthusiastic about taking on these challenges and helping President Biden administer a new era of transportation and the challenges that we face. Mayor Buttigieg, a Harvard graduate, Rhodes Scholar, former United States reservist, who I believe served in Afghanistan, also understands the challenges of small-town mayors and the things that transportation systems and the impacts they can have. He knows the challenges we now face because of COVID-19, that there is a new burden on our transportation system because of the impacts of lost revenue. State departments of transportation estimate $50 billion in lost revenues over the next 5 years. Airports have lost $23 billion because of people no longer flying. Transit agencies have lost an estimated $50 billion by the end of 2021. So these losses will continue to compound until we find the best way to protect our transportation workers, our travelers, and to continue to help with personal protective equipment, testing, vaccines, clear health-based protocols to help return safety to our transportation system and public confidence. That is one of the reasons why we're fighting so hard for this next package of investments. President Biden took decisive action by mandating that people wear masks, which is a giant step forward in our transportation system. I think there's more we can do, and hopefully our colleagues can work together on that. The long-term revenue outlook for transportation also is changing, and so it will be a long time before its recovery. So I believe that Mayor Pete Buttigieg is the right choice for this job because he was mayor of South Bend. He dealt with infrastructure where the rubber meets the road, managing state, federal, and local resources to help build infrastructure in his community. He also helped facilitate public-private partnerships for the dollars to go farther and important models for future investments in transportation. One of those projects, the South Shore Double Track Project, whose full funding grant agreement was signed earlier this month, is like many other state and local projects. The South Shore Double Track demanded impressive coordination between the federal, state, and local governments to bring it to fruition. Mayor Buttigieg's Smart Street Initiative also shows he knows how to operate and succeed in a current environment and will be able to help communities around the country replicate the success that he had at South Bend. He won't be the first mayor to be the Secretary of Transportation, but I think we can say that when you have a mayor in that job, they're going to pay attention to local transportation infrastructure investment to help our communities continue to grow and be competitive. We have a major opportunity, I believe, to now deliver on infrastructure needs of many of those communities. We should start immediately by talking about infrastructure packages and working on the transportation infrastructure plan for the 21st century, because it's clear we have opportunities this year with the surface transportation programs expiring in September. Communities everywhere are demanding that we help work on these important issues for their communities. But Mayor Buttigieg will also be called on thinking about the new eras of transportation and how we maintain our competitiveness. He will have to think about issues of ensuring safety with new autonomous vehicle technologies and unmanned aircraft. He'll have to promote stronger emission standards for automobiles, aviation, and maritime industries. He'll have to support the continued growth of electric vehicle infrastructure. He'll have to make big investments in game-changing projects that will help us move freight more cost-effectively through our nation. People will want to know and understand what our reliable passenger rail and transit systems and the investment in bridges are going to be for the future. So all of this are a big challenge, but I know that this nominee is up to that challenge. He did well at the committee in making sure that people understood that he believes that those challenges need to be addressed for America to continue to move forward. From my perspective, just in the state of Washington, before COVID had really hit, we saw 78 hours per year of delayed traffic. That is, the average commuter spent 78 hours in delayed traffic. A recent study in my state estimated that Washingtonians lost more than $7.4 billion each year in lost time and wasted fuel due to congestion, deteriorated roads, and safety problems. As America starts to head back to the office, no one wants to spend time back in that world of congestion, and so we need to make critical investments. People in Puget Sound know that we need to fix the West Seattle Bridge. They know in Southwest Washington that the Columbia River needs a new bridge across I-5. In Eastern Washington, they know that we need a north-south corridor. And in Everett, they know that the trestle needs replacement if goods from Eastern Washington are going to get to the Port of Everett and out the door. All of these things are investments, and with them come the structures of things like at-grade crossings, passenger rail systems, and safety that are huge, I believe, infrastructure investments that have not been quite appreciated. I was very pleased to get Mr. Buttigieg's commitment during our session with him that these things, at-grade crossings, ports competitiveness, and moving products safely should be a big priority for the future. The Lander Street project in Seattle, which was an investment of the new freight program, was just a few blocks, but literally congestion for hours had stopped traffic from getting from I-5 to the Port of Seattle. The Lander Street in a lot of ways represents what it really is, a bridge to the future, a bridge to get people moving where they need to go and the right investment being competitive for the future. Well, we're going to face many more delays if America doesn't remain competitive. So I look forward to working with Mr. Buttigieg on all of these issues. He also, during the committee hearing process, committed that he will continue to work with Senator Wicker and I on the important issues of aviation safety. He committed to us that he understood that aviation safety and the FAA need to continue to make reforms. I believe that if you want to be the leaders in aviation, you have to be the leaders in aviation safety, and I think Mayor Buttigieg gets and understands that that will be a very big job of the Department of Transportation as well. So, Mr. President, I enthusiastically support this nominee. I look forward to the type of focus that he can give to the Department of Transportation. This area of our government right now needs to address the COVID crisis. It needs to help us plan for a better transportation system of the future, and it needs to understand that this transportation infrastructure and investment in these changes in these sectors of cars and planes and passenger systems are all very dynamic, changing industries, and so our competitiveness will be at stake as well. So I encourage my colleagues to support this nominee. I'm sure we will hear a lot of discussion from him and a lot of bipartisan effort to help get our transportation system fully funded. With that, Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Nomination. The yeas and nays were previously ordered. The clerk will call the roll.
Is there anyone in the chamber who would like to vote or change his or her vote? If not, the yeas are 86, the nays are 13. The nomination is confirmed.